I'm Sean Lundgren. I actually swindled Zach into hosting this place, this event. So I kind of proposed the idea and said, hey, why don't you host it? So this is Zach Bloom, who is the founder of Tribe. This is his building. So if you break it, you got to talk to him. So break whatever. Yes.
Already got my chairs.
Oh yeah.
Chairs are free.
Oh, okay. Oh, we already broke something. Okay, all right. So that means it's going to be successful. So, tonight really is in the spirit of Utah Tech Week. It is just makers getting together, or builders getting together and just sharing, highlighting, celebrating what it is to actually make physical products, right? So that's the spirit of tonight. It'll be pretty informal. We're going to have 3 presentations by 3 executives or 3 founders that have started product companies. They've gone through the full cycle, or going through cycles, and we'll actually just have them speak, and then after that we will have a panel where really it's up to you. I would love to have you ask questions. It's really here for you tonight. I also have questions as well, and we actually have our VIP guest here, who's a high schooler. Middle schooler or high schooler?
Middle school.
Middle schooler.
Yeah.
This is the next generation, guys. So you guys give him some love. So with that, I will turn the time over to Reg. You can introduce yourself and then go into your bit.
Okay, I'll just play this. This is something actually we prepared. I was just down in Houston speaking at a SolidWorks event that they asked us to come down to. So it just sort of highlights some of the things we've done. There's no speaking on it, so I can kind of talk over it. My name's Reg Pratt, and I've been mostly in development and manufacturing my whole life since my early 20s. I've been in mostly off-road. I started a company called TerraFlex, which we do suspension. Some people have heard of that. We started off in a building, maybe not quite as big as this, and then I sold that. And when I sold it, we had about 330 employees. So Jeep changed their platform, and they went from leaf-sprung vehicles to coil-sprung vehicles, and then we had a store. People were coming in and saying, "Oh, I live in a Jeep." But nobody made a kit, and so we decided, well, let's make a kit. And then when the big people come out and start doing theirs, we'll just stop. But then we had some innovative ideas, and it took off from there. But I've had others too. I had Prodigy Engineering, which I worked with Zach on. What's that? With you, we worked together, and we had a contract indirectly with the Department of Energy for plug-in hybrid electric vehicles. I've had scuba diving equipment, manufacturing that I've done. So a lot of that stuff, and the things I've learned, I'll just go over 2 of them because time is kind of a critical thing, but if you're starting and you're working in that industry, the number one thing I've made is a viable product. And the caution that I would give people, because I've made this mistake myself, is to not look at something and you love it, and you love it so much that you talk yourself into it being a viable product. That is really easy to do. Fortunately, with the very first company I did, we had people telling us what they wanted. And we had an entity that, they were coming to us and, do you have this? No. So that told us we had a viable idea, and we started making the product off of that. But then as that company grew, we came up with other ideas and other products. And now there's a lot of products in that line, but there's been some that were duds. We had people talking to us about making gear sets for Isuzus, and somehow we had a stroke and decided that was probably a good idea. We invested tons of money, and we sold tens of those things, and we scrapped the rest after hundreds of thousands of dollars loss. The same with the scuba company. We didn't. That company was not what I had hoped. It wasn't. We sold it, but I learned that it's not a really good idea to go into something that you don't know the industry very well. But a viable product. So yeah, you might love it. Make sure that everyone else loves it. It's really cool in developing, and I call it like this thing we were talking with SolidWorks, and I call it the magic of SolidWorks. But it is when you have an idea and you want it, and then you get it in your hand. That's a big accomplishment for anybody. That's hard work. And then somebody else comes up and goes, "Gosh, I want one of those." That's magical, and that's when you know your company's going to go. But if you're talking to people about the idea and they go, "Oh, wow, that's cool," but they don't want one, you might take one and be very disciplined and honest with yourself. So that's one thing I would say. But then it comes to the bigger one, which is cash. And in developing products, I'll tell you a couple of stories, but cash management, they say cash is king. It is king. It is always king. It's king over profit. It's king over everything. So at TerraFlex, we started selling these products. We only sold 2 wholesalers, off-road shops, and we started to grow. And we grew really fast. We had 60 and 50 and 70% years. And there's a challenge with that. In cash, like you buy a certain quantity here, and then they're making it, maybe you pay for half because you don't do it all in-house. And so you have minimum order quantity, and you pay for half of that here, and then get it here, and you pay for the other half here, and then over here, you start to sell it and get some of that money back. But now you're growing, so you're buying another block of it here, half again. Now you pay for one whole order before you've gotten one whole order in. I remember sitting around a table with my partners, and we had to come up with 10 grand. But our taxes were due, and that was 600 grand for all of us. We couldn't come up with the 10. I mean, cash can be a big problem. So, securing that. And the thing I wish I would have learned, looking at that scenario, we had banks coming in, banks will loan you money if you don't need it, type of thing. Everyone feels probably that way. And they're telling us, you need to slow down your sales, because we had these big sales numbers. The problem was, we were going overseas. We were going to Taiwan at the time, and their MOQ, their minimum order quantity, was such that our inventory turns were like 0.5. So we'd have to buy enough that by the end of the year, we only sold half of that product. But at the end of the year, we still, in our cost of goods sold, were about 30% less than if we were buying it here in the States. So we were in this conundrum, and they're saying, slow down your sales, raise your prices. We need to get rid of that inventory. We need to increase our sales. So MOQs are a big thing, and if anyone's new, finding a company that can do smaller quantities, maybe for you, maybe you have it's a little bit more money, you make a little bit less profit, you save on the king, which is cash. And it was great for us in some ways, but it was miserable hell for about 4 years, where you're mortgaging your house, and we did all of that stuff. All that stuff is scary. But then on the flip side, we've also had situations where our sales weren't quite like we thought, because we didn't really be honest with ourselves on a viable product. Now you've got the worst situation, which is you have no sales and you've got product. And that was a thing as well. So I think those things are probably the most important thing. Development costs. Are people here are you guys developing products? You have products that you're already manufacturing? I could be, because developing is a challenge too, and there's a race, right? So you get some money, maybe you got it, maybe you borrowed it, whatever it is, but I've got to go get this product on the market, and the clock is ticking, and every single day is another dollar gone. And you get yourselves into positions where you're like, we ran into a problem in development, and this happens for sure every single time. I'm gonna make the easiest thing on planet Earth, and guess what? It took me twice as long as I thought. And so I calculated for the time I thought, and it took me twice as long, and so I've been out of money for all of this time. I think it's important to get a minimum viable product and send it, right? Make sure it's quality, make sure all those things, those boxes are checked. But one of the things that happens with development that I see, and this is really, I think, a problem with engineers, is you develop to a point, and it's like a false summer, right? You get to that point, this is where we need to be, and then you get there and you're like, holy crap, I can see a better thing. We could do this now, and we could do this now, and we could do this now, and the product never gets out. And the money's going away, and you're like, well, yeah, but if we did this thing, it would be easy. It's only 4 weeks, 3 weeks, or 2 weeks, but it takes twice as long as you think. And suddenly the 2 weeks, 4 weeks, or whatever is 4, 8, or 10, or 12. And again, you're running out of money. So when you set the discipline, this is where we need to get to. And if we come up with cool stuff, great, we're going to iterate. But this is going out when we hit this mark. That's our business model. We're not deviating. I think that's a really important one. I've often said, you know what, engineers should rule the world because they develop everything. Every bridge, every cool product. But the challenge is they never get something all the way done. There's always a better one. And so somebody has to be there to say, Bill, we're done. Send it, you know. And then and also iterating keeps you fresh. You know, I had this Audi I bought and I loved it. I thought badass and I'm feeling really good. But then one day I pull up to a light and another Audi pulls up, same car, but a couple years newer. And now they've changed the body. And I'm like, now I have an old car, you know? And so now I want a new car. And that's the same thing you can do with your product. One of the challenges I had with the scuba industry is they never changed. There were, like we had a fin that we developed. It was one of those easy products that took forever. And it beat in special forces, it beat in their tests the highest selling fin on the market by about 4 minutes in this test. We were all stoked, but we couldn't get people to change. And the fin that it beat was the same fin that they use today in the military. And it's the same fin that they used in 1967. And so the problem with that was they also sold it to consumers and they'd go in and look at a product on the wall. And like, those are my fins. And there's my BC or whatever. And then the guy would come out, hey, what can I get you? He was, I think I'm good. Because nothing changed. There's no pressure. I'm not on the boat looking like Richard Simmons or something. The styles don't even change. So iterating keeps that stuff fresh. Those are the basic things that I would say. If you're starting out, I would find some of these suppliers, if you need them, they will allow you low MOQs. They make a little bit more money, you pay a little bit more money, that's okay. Make sure your cash is solid, and cash forecast. If you don't know how to do them, you better learn. Because that's the killer. And it's the killer if things are going great, and it's the killer if things are going terrible. It is the killer. So learn the cash forecast, iterate, get it done, and get it out on the market after it meets the minimum acceptance criteria that you set. That's really all I have. Thank you. Thank you.
Jose Rojas is, he's a, actually, did you win a pitch competition last year, or?
I participated in it.
Okay. I thought you should have won. But anyway, so Jose is he actually not yet. He's the executive or founder of a well, I'll let him describe what he does. But basically, it's a compute cluster and a drone company. So we'll let Jose talk about that.
So I'll talk about both, and in the Q&A we can go in whatever direction you guys are most interested in. But Pylon is our drone company. Helios is our modular data center company. So I'll talk about Pylon first. This actually started a few years ago. I started a nonprofit, and this was to help with humanitarian Ukraine. When the war broke out, I was looking at what was happening, and I thought, maybe there's a way to get an abundance of goods and that people are willing to ship over to Ukraine over there, but they have no way to bring it. So we provided the logistical support. We worked with hospitals, get ambulance vehicles, medical equipment, and we get it to Ukraine. So we started doing that, and we started working more and more with the military, especially as we got over SUVs that they would repurpose for emergency medevac And as we worked with them, we saw what they were doing with drones. And at this point, everyone knows this, right? Everyone knows that they've been using these quadcopter, 10, 13-inch FPV drones to basically take out tanks, right? Each one of these can cost $500 to $1,000 to build. Very cost effective, and it can take out a $7, $8 million tank. So I saw this going on, and my goal from the beginning with Crane was how can I make the most impact over there? And I saw what these guys were doing, and I thought, man, dollar per dollar, the impact that it has when dedicated to those drones, it's huge, and I'd love to help out there. My only background in robotics is I was on the robotics team, right? But I got together with some friends and partners that knew more on the software side, on the hardware side. And together we ended up working with some different squadrons in Ukraine in developing FPV drones that were better and better. And we found that we were able to bring the same kind of iteration cycles you see in software to hardware. This was huge. We were going entirely off of donations. So since we started doing this about 2 years ago, 1.5 to 2, then we've done over $100,000 of these cheap FPV drones. And each time we come up with a new idea and we work with the soldiers directly to do this, they say, hey, we're having a problem with Gen. And we'll come up with, okay, well, let's find a way to frequency hop, right, the signal. And, we're having a problem with the weight. How can we make this lighter? And so we've been doing this, and every week we've been able to ship out a new set of drones. Every month we do about 10 drones. And in this way, we've been able to get those same quick iteration cycles to the battlefield, to an industry that is typically very long, right? Years of R&D, testing in the deserts, then maybe it ends up on the battlefield. Ukraine has changed the game with that. So I want to show you guys a video of what it looks like out on the battlefield. This is footage from my drones. And so we found that these drones have been incredibly effective. They're able to attach 2 to 4 kilogram payloads to each drone. In this one, we used a couple drones to take out an armored vehicle. And oftentimes they'll work in tandem with an ISR drone, or intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance drone. So you'll have one drone with a really good camera, and then the other drones, of course, they're one way. So that's what we've been building over at Python. And with that, we've been able to get people interested in funding us to do something bigger and to build what is the next drone. And that's this. So most drones today, like I said, are these quadcopter drones. Think of a DJI camera drone. They're basically those. And they have their tweaks and designs, but that's basically what they are. This right here is something that we've been developing. It is powered by a small turbine engine and about 2 liters of kerosene. The propellers here are really just for direction. And the goal of this drone is to get over many of the hurdles that FPV drones are now facing. This drone is able to go to 10,000 feet. Most of the drones now stop at around 2,000. Most drones now stop at around 100 miles per hour. This will go to 500. By doing this, we avoid all kinds of problems based on the battlefield, like jamming, getting shot down. They have drones that shoot out nets. Some of the companies here in Utah do that. And then one of the challenges in designing this was designing a board with camera stabilizers that could actually handle the vibrations that happen at this speed. None of the flight controllers, none of the chipsets were able to do this, while also having the onboard computational power necessary for auto-targeting. These things are going 500 miles an hour. You're not going to be controlling them the traditional way with a set of valves. You're going to be selecting on an iPad your target, and it's going to do the rest. So, what's that?
That's the swarmware.
That's the swarmware, yeah. So, while developing this drone company, the big lesson for me is I started this with zero money, right? I was was in college. But financing can get very creative. Initially, it came from people who were just very supportive of the cause. And there's huge power in attaching what you're doing to something that people really care about. And for us, that's where it started. And we're able to get donations, and people saw the impact of these drones, and that fueled the R&D and the development of these. Then there's Helios. So Helios, I started about a year ago, just over a year ago. And I come from the energy background. I worked in energy for years, in solar and renewables, and I found this huge problem in that there's a lot of wasted energy. There's power plants all throughout the United States that are operating at maybe 50% capacity. They could be producing twice as much electricity as they are now. And the reason they're not is because they don't have enough customers in their immediate geographic area. And so a lot of electricity goes wasted. And I was seeing this problem, especially exists with renewables. And I thought there's got to be a way to make use of this electricity, especially when energy is the biggest bottleneck in data centers right now. They consume massive amounts of power. They're sucking up massive amounts of water, all to fuel the growth in AI. Now, I personally am a believer in AI. I'm an optimist. I recognize it has its downsides, but there's got to be a better way of going about it. So we wanted to create a sustainable data center that instead of going against how the electric grid and infrastructure works, it could work with it. It could take advantage of the fact that there's all these scattered pockets of excess electricity across multiple power plants. And the key in doing that was developing a data center that was small enough. If you get a data center that's too big, then these small pockets of electricity aren't very helpful. So we developed a shipping container-sized data center. But the way this started was with an MVP, and he highlighted the importance of that. Now, again, we didn't have any money. So in order to get an MVP, we created a desktop computer-sized data center, right? We put in a couple GPUs into this and said, all right, here's our server. We're going to place one of these in every home in America. It'll plug into the wall, and every house that has solar, it'll be able to power these up. And together, they'll come in and work like one cloud, right? AI companies can rent out the GPUs, and that worked technically. About $4,000, we were able to create one, and I just used my credit card, and we developed it. It worked. It was producing cash, and that was enough to sell the dream and then attract the real investment. And we realized that operationally that has its challenges, right? You can't go out and service thousands of people in every home. And so we scaled up, and we found this. Now to build this, it's $10+ million. And I found there was huge value in dreaming a lot bigger than what I initially started. Because then you start to attract the kind of, in our case, capital, the kind of investors that are willing to play that game. We found energy infrastructure funds who are not making $250,000 investments, they're making $30 million investments. And by proving out the concept initially and starting the company off of the back of that, we've been able to now get funding to build these. And our goal for this next year is to build 20+ of these throughout the US. And it works the same way. They come together and provide cloud computing to AI. So that's us. That's Helios. That's what I would.
Quick question. When you say cloud computing, are you talking about legacy data centers, or are you talking like hyperscale?
Hyperscale. Yeah, I think so. In each of these is just a bunch of NVIDIA GPUs.
Yeah.
And so the service we're offering is when an AI company needs to run their models, train their models, then they do it on our servers.
Will you rent out one to or a set of them to a certain hyperscaler, or will you have it decentralized, we have this much?
Both. So we found small to mid-sized companies are renting out 100 GPUs each throughout a year. And in each one of these, we can fit 1,000 GPUs. So big 10 customers per container. But if the customer is big enough, then we'll rent out the whole thing.
So you become additional computing beyond the hyperscaler?
We do, yeah. Yeah. We found these provide a huge benefit of edge computing. The long-term vision of this is we have the scattered throughout. And so when someone uses our cloud platform, then it will automatically connect them to a data center that's physically closest to them, lowers latency and things like that.
Is there any consideration for on-site use as well? If somebody wants to use
Oh, absolutely.
to have them on-site for a period of time.
So we found that, I know this is quite weird getting up, but it's the same concept. We found that this works well with our drone company.
Yeah.
Some of the same people are interested in the same thing, because in order to control a fleet of autonomous drones, you need some edge compute.
Yeah, that's the key right there.
Exactly.
Since they are super containers, are they fully portable? Like you just unplug and go?
So this version is one where it is just really fast to build, but then once it's installed, it stays there. However, the version that we're thinking about developing for military use is smaller and it stays on the back of the truck.
And he's going to be flown into the battlefields with drones.
Okay.
For edge compute.
Awesome. That's actually very much. Well, yeah. We'll have more questions in the. Not least, we have Zach Bloom, who is actually he's many talents. He's actually been behind the scenes of a lot of hardware tech startups here in the Utah Valley. So we'll let him talk about Try, which is his latest manifestation of what he's doing, and exactly go ahead.
Thanks everybody for coming and showing up. Of course, we have lots of food, so I'm Zach Bloom. This is my company, Try Technology. What we do here is kind of a lot. We do rapid prototyping. You've seen a couple, and you're welcome to walk around after this and kind of check out the space. But we have several different types of 3D printers, so we can print extremely accurate parts, extremely strong parts. We print certain more assembly here. We've got an SMT line in the warehouse. We do things for cutting in another location, but it's our equipment. So we do metal parts. We've done some for some of these guys too. We also do some product development. We've got a few firmware engineers, hardware, electrical, PCB design, that sort of thing, mechanical design. And then we can also manage the production side and the supply chain. And we also do our own products. So we released one, which is the hair dryer display that you see there. It's sort of a competitor to Dyson that doesn't cost as much as Dyson and probably lasts longer than Dyson. So that's the idea with that. Our company slogan is higher technology, higher yield. The idea is bringing higher technology to more people. You know, it needs to cost $500-600 for a really cool hair dryer. So we're coming out with some other projects as well, products that, like Ranch said, MVP hair dryer, which point, so we released it and we finally got up on Amazon. Product companies we'll get into in a minute, but one of the hardest things about a product company is that you have to manage a supply chain, you have to get inventory places, you have to stock it, or figure out who's going to stock it, you have to get made and deal with MOQs, which is a holy cash nightmare, and most factories will not support payment terms. It's pretty much cash up front. Cash before delivery. So, a brief recent history of me in the last 10 years or so, or maybe a little more than that. Back when I met Ranch, it was a prodigy. We did some engineering for a company called Via Motors, which is now essentially defunct. Many-hour electric building down off Center Street. We used to drive past it on the freeway. Did some fun projects there. They spent a whole lot of money. They had a whole lot of investment. It's easy to spend all your money when you've got tens of millions or even more sitting in the bank, and it's easy for that to disappear. After that, Prodigy was absorbed by Via, essentially sold to Via, and we continued doing Via things. I left that, joined a company called PSDI, which kind of went down in flames, but it was a fun ride. I didn't start at PSDI, I was the electrical engineer for them doing PCB design, and then eventually the director of engineering. So what we would do is we would have people come in and sort of interview, we get their idea, we help them work on it, we design the mechanicals, we design the electrical stuff, and then we push it through to production. And our goal was not so much to make money off the engineering, it was to make money off the production and the long-term sales of the product. So we take a small portion, of course, we produce it, get it into the country. It was mostly overseas. I spent a lot of time over in China with PSDI. Our most profitable product was hoverboards. We were the #2 importer of hoverboards when that was a fact. And then some of the really cheap ones started catching fire, and we had to pivot and get UL certification. And anybody who's been through, has anybody, by show of hands, been through UL certification for anything? Holy nightmare, depending on the product. It can be easy for some things, it can be extremely difficult. Our hair dryer is UL certified. That was a 6-month nightmare or so. Many iterations, we had to be quick at changing things. A whole thing. From PSDI, it crashed, and I'll have some lessons learned from there. I went over to Pura, and if anybody's familiar, Pura makes smart fragrance diffuser, or holds a couple of fragrances. It's sort of like a Blades plug-in with Wi-Fi. Kind of a fun little device. The hardware is not particularly complicated. A lot of the IP is in the algorithms behind it, and a lot of the value is in the fragrance. Of course, it's a subscription model. And then you also get data. And that's another thing with hardware is don't just think about how much you can sell the device for. Data is insanely valuable. For Pura, fragrance-wise, the whole fragrance industry has no data. Because you make a candle, you make 10,000 of this candle, you ship it to a bunch of stores, and then a bunch of people will buy this candle. And then you think, great, it's popular. Then you make another 50,000 candles, and you send them out again, and maybe you only sell 2,000, because it actually wasn't popular, but you have no way of actually giving feedback, even though people like it or not. Because nobody's returning a used candle. So they had no idea. With Pura, it was actually easy to see when people used fragrances, what room of the house they put it in, because you pick, when it says, what room did you put this in, and you pick bedroom or kitchen or something. That data is fed back. So companies like Capri Blue, the makers of the Volcano scent, one of, if not the most popular fragrance on the planet. They got to learn where people wanted certain fragrances in their house. Then they can feed that data into their other business areas like candles. And they can develop candles for different scents, different settings, different sizes. They can see how much people use it. So data is insanely valuable, and you can sell that data to people in the industry. I helped Pura develop they had a CTO before me. I was their CTO. Back at PSDI, I met Pura, and I helped them develop their first device. But I'll talk more about that later. After Pura, I left them and joined Inergy, Sean's company, making portable power stations. So that presented a bunch of new challenges. Battery packs, lithium batteries, shipping them. I had quite a bit of experience back at my time with Prodigy and VIA, except nothing small. We weren't shipping electric vehicle battery packs, except in the vehicles themselves. So making smaller batteries, solar charging, MPPT, all of that. Inverters. We did some cool stuff at Inergy because most of our competition was from China. Most of it was just, even the guys here, like Lion Energy, Goal Zero, their product was largely, and even still I believe is largely designed and developed in China, produced in China. They do a little bit of innovation here, all the marketing, the support, warehousing. it still comes from China. So at Inergy, we were manufacturing in China, but we developed 90% of the product. The circuit boards, the housings, we went with a metal housing because we designed a plastic part, they're pretty expensive. Something this size, you might spend $100,000 on boards, no more, depending on how many different parts you have, how many different materials. We designed the power station out of sheet metal. And actually, before I joined Inergy, they were already doing that because it's something that you could do in your garage, which is essentially where Inergy started. So it was something that they could do in a garage. And like Jose said, sometimes it's just get some prototype built. If you want to build a giant container data center, maybe you start with desktop because it's what you can afford, but you can sell that. And it's way better than just coming up with images, renderings. Anyways, I left Inergy to start Try 2 years ago, almost 2 years ago now. April of 2024, sort of more like June of 2024. And that's been fun. I've enjoyed this. I've enjoyed making things, having different equipment, different experiences, hiring some different people, hiring some past connections. Johnny actually in the group was one of the first engineers that worked here. And then you've seen a couple of my other employees. So PSDI, there were a whole lot of lessons learned at PSDI. I never had the pleasure of being in the management, leadership team, ownership, but what ultimately brought PSDI down was not capability, it was management, poor management of funds, cash, hard money loans, things that any business could fall into, but it's really easy to do as a hardware business because hard goods cost money, like Branch said. So I wrote a lot of text because that's what I do, so I'm going to kind of boil it down. Strong points at PSDI, the engineering team, we had good organization, that was really important. PSDI, you could imagine, we didn't really do our own products, but we were developing products for, I don't know how many, Isaac, what should be there, I don't know how many tens of companies we were developing products for at the same time. It's hard to stay organized, it's hard to keep track. You really got to block out your time and say, I'm going to work on this project for this amount of time, and I'm not going to jump back and forth between projects because you miss stuff. The same applies with your own company. If you're developing multiple pieces of hardware, multiple products, take a certain amount of time. Maybe it's your mornings for one and your afternoons for the other. Don't get too multitasking because you'll miss things, you'll miss little things. We had dedicated teams for hardware and mechanical. I didn't do very much of anything other than electrical and firmware back then. Now I do mechanical, 3D modeling, which I started doing because it was easier to kind of model up my idea than try and explain it to somebody. But our teams were very focused. If you have too many sort of jack of all trades engineers that you hire, which I'll get into, that can be a good thing, but once you start to grow and work on more projects, you really want to have people focusing on something. Time blocks, I talked about that. Because we had so many projects and so many clients, we could afford test equipment. We had a really sweet 3D printer similar to some of these that we have here. So we could make really accurate models, really cool models. We could be really confident when we went to tooling that the part was going to tool right because mold changes are expensive, they take time. I've had to do some myself with my Leatherman in China, just to tweak just a little bit, one little part. And mold shops get tired of making changes, so you don't want to deliver a part to a mold shop that you're really not sure and you just kind of lob it over fence. Because even if you're paying for the changes, they get tired of it. They just want to make the parts. So good equipment was important. We had a lot of good electrical test equipment too. That's important. We could afford to do better testing for these clients than they would have ever been able to do themselves because it's just cost prohibitive. like Pura, for instance. So, those clients were also able to offload the stress of the product design. That can be really helpful when you're in a very young state. If you have a little bit of money, people cost money, salaries are expensive, tax is way more expensive than you think it is, because you're covering a lot of the tax of your employees. If you can find a good design firm, and there are several even in this area, if you can find a good design firm that doesn't cost you an arm and a leg, it's usually less than the cost of a salary or to a few engineers to have somebody else design your product. And then once you have an MVP that you can sell, then you start bringing on your own engineers. And maybe you have one in-house that kind of acts like the connecting node. But that was really beneficial. There were a lot of products that launched because of PSDI, and Pura was one of them. Because Pura did not have a whole lot of cash. And I'll talk about Pura next. We did retainer-based billing. Again, cash is king. That was great because we never had to run all the time. Sean's the red light that is. Retainer-based billing, cash is king. We're going to talk more about that. Struggle points. Multitasking. Again, it sucks. Sometimes you have to do it, but it's a double-edged sword. Be careful. Block out your time. I'm terrible at it. Block out your time. Don't jump between 30 different things at once. We had to have extra organization, so something that's really helpful is a project management software like Monday, or we use Jira here. There's a lot that are pretty cheap, pretty even free. I think Jira is free if you have less than 10 people or something like that. Project management, really helpful. Have weekly, bi-weekly project management meetings just to keep up on what's going on, sync your team together. And of course, if you're a company like PSDI, you bid on projects and maybe people wouldn't bite. You know, and you'd spend a lot of time working up a quote, working up a bid. What I learned there was don't put too much energy into trying to bid a project if anybody does that sort of work. Put the right amount to get the job, to show that you're worth something, that they should trust you. Don't put too much. Pura, quick overview. Again, Pura's a really cool company. They started tiny, no office, and then they moved to UBRC, which is a pretty good place for startups. It's the Business Resource Center. So you can rent just one room of an office. It's super cheap. They have a lot of resources over there. That's where Pura started. So they have some 3D printers and a couple other things. Really helpful staff. Cash is king. Pura spent very little cash, as little as possible, really. The major things, like Ranj mentioned, you gotta have a good product. Pura had a great product. Pura, for years, sold only the wall plug-in diffuser. Now they have a car device and a tabletop diffuser and maybe another couple of things, but for years they only sold the wall device because it was MVP, it worked. The idea was to deliver fragrances and get people subscribing. It was easy to sell. Again, don't just fall in love with a product, like Ranj said. You love your own ideas. It's hard to say no to yourself. Sometimes you just gotta say no to yourself. It's not a good idea. Probably 2 or 3 out of 10 ideas are actually gonna take. And then the rest, the majority of your ideas are just not really gonna serve enough of the market. You won't be able to access enough of the market to sell them. Like I said, Pura kept costs low, kept office space expenses low, didn't spend a lot on people, didn't spend a lot on, they used equity. When I was hired on, I came on at a pretty affordable salary plus some equity. That is a pretty good lever when you're a startup. Offer people equity. You don't have to give them a whole company, 1%, 2%, something like that. Get some key assets, get their skin in the game, make them really want to make the company succeed. That helps with cash because your biggest burns are going to be salary and salary comes first, and the longer you take to develop a product, the more you're going to spend on salary. So some of the things that, and another major one for Pura was they had IP and patents. That made it easier to secure funding when they didn't actually have any revenue. Even with some devices out in the field, revenue was still pretty low. So investors were mainly looking at potential, does it work, is it reliable? They had something they could toy around with, an app. But Pura had 5 or 6 patents. You can get a patent done, maybe $5,000 or $6,000, something like that. It's not terrible. You don't need to go ham. You don't need a ton of patents. But if you have some IP, investors are interested in that if you don't have revenue. Because an idea is just an idea. Investors don't like to sign NDAs because they're talking to lots of people about ideas. And there are some bad investors out there who will take your idea and do it themselves. But for the most part, an idea is just not that valuable if you're not willing to put any skin behind it. Pura struggled with cash for most of the time that I was there, actually. They only came into cash, and now they have some 250 employees, but when I was there, it was like 5 at the beginning, and then maybe 10 to 15 when they left. Again, cash is king. I can't say it enough. They had some initial seed money. They trusted their initial CTO way too long. He spent tons of time in China, didn't deliver something. I think the motto, hire fast, fire faster, is pretty important. If somebody's not a fit, if they're not producing, let them go. Cash is king. We'll spend it all on salaries. And Pura really struggled with their initial factory partner. They didn't want to make changes, they just wanted to make the device, they didn't want to support them. Payment terms, the product was expensive, MOQs were really high. Often you can find factories that will give you lower MOQs. You don't have to just end up with the one factory. But be careful not to let a factory do your designs for you without giving you any source files, because I can't tell you how many companies I've helped out, come into contact with. So some smart things with Pura. MVP simplified the device design. It had some cool features that the founders liked, like a USB port on the side. Turns out nobody used that. So we got rid of it. That made certification way easier. It made the device cheaper. It was a cool feature. You could use it to sell it, maybe, because people would think, oh, it can serve a dual purpose. It wasn't worth it. Scrapped it. We were developing a few products at once. The CEO decided, let's focus on the wall unit, just the wall unit. Unless you have free time, just the wall unit. And that was a great move, because again, they sold that for years. And they still sell it, it's their highest selling product. And once they had a sellable product, they put as much money as they could into marketing it and selling it and supporting it, fixing bugs as quickly as possible. So, to wrap up my key points, watch your cash. Hardware is way more expensive than software. You have to buy a physical product. You have to make actual prototypes. You can't just show somebody images on an iPhone. That only goes so far. Guard your IP. Overseas sourcing is pretty risky. We've all seen Chinese factories. It's a general mentality that all information is kind of public knowledge. They're not big on IP. It's kind of a cultural thing. I don't mean it as a bash to China, but it doesn't really match with Western culture in that we guard our ideas and our IP. So be careful. Don't share your source files. Whenever I send stuff over to China, I'm not sending SolidWorks files, I'm sending step files. I'm not sending schematics with my PCB designs. I'm not sending source code. And if you can, split your design up. Have one factory making the circuit boards, the other one making the plastics and assembling it. Don't share the designs between them. If they want to rip you off, make it as hard as possible without making it hard on yourself. Design for manufacturing. This is important. Everybody's got a 3D printer. You can 3D print whatever geometry you want. A lot of mechanical engineers don't take into account, well, experienced ones do, inexperienced ones do not take into account, can I make this? You're not going to make a 3D printed product 90% of the time. So design for manufacturing. This one's good. Make it exist, then make it better. You don't have to make the perfect product right out the gate. And your prototype, you can go through alpha, beta, however many letters you want. But make it exist. Give yourself something that you can feel, show to investors, anything. When Pure came to me, it was this wall device that had spider webs of wires between the two sides. It didn't really work, it sort of worked. But at least they could illustrate the idea, at least they could give some investor money with it. That was important. Good prototypes equals good manufactured product and good investor show and tell. When you do have something that's polished enough, spend a little bit of money on good prototypes. Maybe you don't 3D print it yourself with a cheap 3D printer. Maybe you find somebody who can make it better. Maybe you paint them, sand them, whatever it takes. Give yourself something good to show investors. There's some other notes down there as well, but we're short on time. If your hardware uses firmware, make sure that you can update it in the field without having to fly somebody out to it. I'm sure Jose's had plenty of experience with that. If you can do firmware over the air like Pura, that was MVP, period. There was no way, even though the device was not terribly expensive, having a customer ship something back to you and send them a replacement or update it and send it back out. Terrible customer experience, not scalable at all, costs you a ton of money. So firmware over the air is important. If it's a more complicated device, at least some way they can plug in a flash drive or something, but that can be pretty difficult for even prosumers. So make sure your hardware is upgradable. If it's something heavy like the modular data centers, make it repairable in the field. You don't want people shooting something back and forth with Inergy. Luckily, we had split up the parts, so if the battery was fine, they could ship the other stuff back. If something was broken, no hazmat fees, it was lighter weight. Modular system. Think about failures in the field, think about bugs, you will have them. Hardware, software, especially software, you won't be able to test everything. Anyways, yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. So I know that we're a little bit over time. Feel free, you need to go, take the food, whatnot. But the next little bit, actually, we'll just have a Q&A. I know that there's some really awesome companies and experiences. Now, really, it's just what questions you have. I'm gonna let our middle schooler maybe ask the first question. I don't know if you have any questions of these experienced executives.
Yeah, for Jose, what are like how much does it cost to keep the GPUs and everything in your data centers? How much does it cost to keep them up and running, like per month?
Yeah, here's a fun way of looking at it. One of our fully built out modules, every hour it'll use about as much electricity as a house would in a month. And so the electricity bill per year is in the $300,000 to $500,000 range.
And because this is edge computing, how are you getting power to? Is it?
Yeah, we plug up right next to power plants. So we talk to power plants that have excess capacity, call them up, sign a contract for a 15-year power agreement, and we station up on their property.
Solar not cut it?
No, solar doesn't cut the whole thing, but they're oftentimes hybrid. So it'll come with solar, with some batteries as backup, and then some other power source.
These are live right now in the field?
We have our first one being built in Salt Lake City, so that'll be live in about 3 or 4 days.
Is another place for that like disaster recovery? Because I know these modular data centers used to exist for DR purposes.
Yeah. The challenge with these is that GPUs are so much more energy intensive. You know, think 10 to 20 times more power per square foot, or however you want to measure it, right? And so the cooling was the biggest challenge. But yeah, there's been modular data centers for a while, so we're just taking it to the GPUs.
Yeah.
Speaking of cooling, how do you cool them?
We cool them with it's called direct to chip cooling. So it pumps in water directly to the chip, and circulates it. And then it's closed loop. So you hear about data centers consuming crazy amounts of water, and that's true for the most part. But we built ours so that they don't need any outside water source, right? It just recycles the same water.
Any other questions? Feel free to ask. I mean, I have questions here that I can talk, but we'll, any. So who here is actually building products? Okay. I think we had one person that was about to come. She had texted me and said, "Hey, I'm actually have a prototype going. What's my next step? Once you have a prototype, how did you guys go from prototype to actual product? Like, what are probably the next steps that you guys can share with the community here?"
What kind of product?
Yeah. I'm not exactly sure. She just said that she finished her prototype, but she didn't know what to do next.
Well,
How to get it to the next stage as far
The
as
next step would be
small units, small number of quantity of units.
No, it's to test it. Like I've got this thing, I've got to put together a testing criteria based on the outcomes that I need. So if I need it to work a certain amount of time or under a certain environment, whatever the case is, I have to create that. And if you have a prototype of one, that's a pretty small sample size too, so you better test the hell out in those environments, whatever it is. And then once you do that, you'll for sure, almost for sure, I should say, find things that you need to change. So in my opinion, a prototype is step one, testing, and then do a second unit, beta, whatever you want to call it, alpha even if you have a mule. And then you make those changes, and you probably do more of them at that time.
Can I ask it a different way? Because I'm a little bit confused by test. Because test could be, hardening the product. It could be the firmware stuff. It could be a lot of different things. Are you talking about that, or are you talking about test some market?
No, I'm talking about testing the product. I'm assuming, if you should test the market before you start designing it. You should really do all your homework up front there. That's before you spend all the money. So you test, you make sure that people want it, and how do you want to do it? There's a million different ways. Like I said, for us with TerraFlex, the test came to us, that test. And that was people coming in the door saying, I need something, there's nothing out there. And it was every single day. So we knew that there was a market for it. They had provided that for us, fortunately. But then we began to build and test and try things that didn't work. The thing that actually set TerraFlex on its way was the testing. We had a lift kit. I don't know if anybody knows about vehicles at all, but just for the sake of time, we kind of copied the design of other similar style suspension lift kits. And then we put it on a ramp to see how it does off-road, because we're talking about Jeeps. And we go up this ramp, and it goes up a little ways, and then that's it. And then the tire comes off the ground. We're like, gosh, that barely been up there. And we start to look, and we see that this control arm that goes from the frame up here at my shoulder to the axle, and this one on the other side, when that suspension tries to twist, the axle acts as a torsion bar, and it just stops everything. Like, no, all we got to do is have some way for that control arm to pivot, and we did that. And now every single manufacturer has some version of an articulating control arm. And it was in the testing. If we hadn't have done that, if we would have just spit it out there, that company would not have known. And so we saw that need, and then made that adjustment. And then we started, because of cash, we had to get those out. So we came up with our idea, we tested our idea a little bit, we set it. And then we started having problems with them wearing fast. That was the hardening piece, durability. And so then we're up against the clock. We're trying to come up with a second iteration, and we know we're going to replace every single one of the first under warranty, because we didn't do it right the first time. And we did. So we came up with the second idea, we replaced it all, and we just sent something.
Is that the same thing that have rockside engineers?
Same thing. Yeah, sometimes that's what you're. It's like when you're a startup, it's not an easy thing. We never, unlike what you did, we never sought capital because we didn't want to do it. But that was challenging.
So I was gonna add, my comment is, some might take it for granted, but whoever asked that question, like, do they truly find the product market fit, like Grant was talking about, right? Like, go out to, a number of ICPs and have them repeatedly say, that's cool, and I'll buy it. I would pay for that. I want that, that would make my life easier. Like, talking to, founders that have had so much success in both products and software, it's like talking to people at each step of the process. But that first part is something that new people I keep here to take for granted, like my brother as well. Wants to prototype something because it's so easier now compared to, 10, 15 years ago. But I'm like, are you sure it's not just for you? You like this idea, but is there a market?
There's another thing you shouldn't do, and that's ask too many of your friends.
Yeah.
Right? Because your friends want to make you happy. Your friends want to support you. They're like, yeah, you can do it. But
Oh, the brother
really what you want
wants
is
one
truth. If your friend says, that's the dumbest idea I've ever heard of, that's a real friend.
Along those lines, also giving your product away for free. If it's free, they're not gonna hurt your feelings because they didn't pay you any money, right? But if they actually paid you money for it, they're gonna tell you, I don't want money's worth. You gotta fix this. This thing's not good.
Yeah, when you're picking your people, you say, look, don't protect my feelings. Protect my pocket. If you're a real friend, I don't care if I give it to you, like you said, it's a good point, or you buy it, but I want honesty back, and I'm gonna prove really hard.
Along those lines about between prototype and production, in your experiences, what kind of advice would you give on, like, hey, it worked well in prototyping, 3D printed, and then in production, totally different? What?
I got a good one. On our hairdryer, we did 2 pre-production runs of a little over 100 units each. When we went to production and we made our first 2,500, 20% of our diffusers started to develop a crack on the back. Now, we had made 100, 150 of them at a time, and we actually didn't have any that had that crack. So there is some question about why it actually cracked. But we changed the material. Yeah, this diffuser on the back coming from the magnet, it developed a small crack on like 20% of them. And we inspected them at the factory before they shipped. We knew how many, we knew which ones were inspected, we knew which ones weren't cracked. So when they got here, we looked at them again and found that more of them had cracked. So we knew, crap, we can't sell these. We've got to pivot, we've got to remake 2,500 diffusers. New material, make the color match. Also, if you're doing something in colors, pick like 1 or 2 colors. Don't pick the whole palette. You can do that later. Apple's a good example with the iPod. They tried colors, then no colors, then no colors, because it's a whole stocking nightmare. But that was a good one.
Yeah, and that's kind of a good example of what I was saying, that you think something's going to take not very long, and it always takes long, and it's the dumbest things like that. I think anybody who's developed a product can say, oh, I had this stupid thing, and it turned out to be, and on it goes, but it's stuff you never anticipated. And the sample size matters. That's your test.
Yeah, and try and break your stuff. I mean, with the hairdryer, we drop them, we do all sorts of things. We did a photo shoot where one of the models we had her actually hang on the power cord. A lot of the UL testing is destructive, tries to break it. If you're doing it with your first prototype, probably don't do the destructive testing when you only have one. But also, if you can avoid it, don't just make one prototype. You know, once you have a proof of concept, make a couple. The marketing guys are always going to want to take one. And somebody's going to misplace one.
Can I just follow on that? How do you know if you're going to do prototypes and like forecasting, like how, if you know, like it's 250 prototypes,
Like
too much,
sales
too little.
forecasting.
Well, this is, yes, I'm actually in sales, but I think it's more so like, if we know the first one's going to be 1,000 units, then we should do a quarter in
Like a test to see what'll fail before you go make a bunch more.
Yeah, like what?
what?
When's enough so you're not doing the whole population? It's just a small population.
Kind of a statistics question.
Well,
Yeah,
the
I
other
just
thing
didn't
that
know if there was
happens-
anything that was like rule of thumb for this type of.
Are you talking about forecasting for testing, or are you talking about forecasting for production?
I don't know. It got brought up like make sure you have enough prototypes of certain things. So
You never do. That's what I felt. You never do. Like you have a thing. I'm gonna get 100, and I'm gonna send them out to all you guys, and you're testing. Oh, it worked. It's perfect. But then you send out 1,000 or 10,000. Now you have a bigger sample size, and weird problems they're going to happen. And I think Zach made a good point because they are going to happen, and if you develop your product so that when it does happen, you have a fix that won't break you. Yeah, that's why you develop it so you can fix it in the field. You use, I think, thermal, but whatever it is.
So then in this case, more would be less potential issues down the road.
The bigger the sample size,
Yeah.
the more likely it is to not happen.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there's a point of diminishing returns.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of getting to.
I couldn't just tell you like make 3% of your production order because you could sell. I think it's based on the complexity of your product more than anything. It's Pura, not a very complex product. Most of the problems were software. Had some crazy problems. And don't be afraid to get on the phone with your customers and talk to them. You use a fake name. You know, I talked to tons of Pura customers. They thought that I think the system picked Aiden. They thought that I was Aiden. They had no idea they were speaking with the CTO, the guy that designed the device, anything like that, but I learned a ton. I went to some customers' houses in the area to figure out what was wrong with their product because you can't think of all the tests. You just can't. You don't know how people are going to use your product, and you should never tell yourself, no, people won't do that.
Yeah, I was just going to say that. The stuff that you have to think about is like, well, what happens if somebody has, I don't know, you do like a plug and they happen to hit it with their elbow because and it goes in the toilet, right? If it's a thing on the sink. It's going to happen. And when you send out hundreds of thousands or millions of them, it's going to happen for sure. It's like Murphy's Law isn't really anything that bad that can happen will happen. It's anything that can happen, given enough time will happen. Mm-hmm. So you get a big enough sample size out there, and this weird, obscure thing, and somebody does that, and you don't do it right, and then maybe they got hurt. Now it's a real deal. So
We'll take one more question and then Diana.
Okay, yeah, so I'm curious, going from prototype to production is a really big shift. Maybe from each of you, what is one problem you wish someone had solved for you when you were going from prototype to production?
Who would be the someone?
So what is a problem that you faced when you were shifting from prototype to production that you wish you had either hired somebody to do or somebody had come in and solved for you that would have made that a lot easier from the product development perspective?
Generally designed for manufacturing, especially like I mentioned in my very short presentation, younger or less experienced engineers aren't great at that. Can this product actually be made at scale? Even if you can make some of them, the Dyson hairdryer, I keep repeating hairdryers because it's the latest thing, but the Dyson hairdryer, you take it apart, it's full of tape. It looks like somebody took it straight out of the lab and said, okay, make 100,000 of these. And then somebody had to figure that out. That makes the product very expensive. So design for manufacturing, can you actually scale it? Having somebody who knows what they're looking for to look through your product and really pick it apart and say, I know you can make these by hand now. I know that you can hire a bunch of hands to make them. The more expensive your product is, the less cash you're going to have later. So I know it's kind of a broad answer, but design for scale and manufacturing.
For us, it was lead times in both the drones and the data centers. Lead times on the most unexpected parts, right? It's a certain kind of motor one day for the data center. It's a certain kind of electrical gear. And if I had someone go out and list out the expected lead time list of all the parts we were considering and say, okay, given X, Y, and Z, this is how long it will take to build the next one, then that would be extremely useful. Because we wasted a lot of time saying, all right, we finally got some money, we finally got some interest, now let's do it, or we have a show coming up in a month, let's build this, and then it turns out the lead time is 3 months, right? So if all that was predicted ahead of time and solved for, then that would allow us to strategize and plan better.
And you're paying salaries.
I would think it is. Like, I'm gonna assume that Zach's part, Zach, the part you talked about is already done, and you've got your, we're hard, we're solid, and we're gonna go into production. You need people, now you have to have somebody that can really run your business. And it's lead times on parts, and since 2020, it's just ridiculous, right? It's never recovered like it was. But, and you can't have it to where you're substituting parts, because then it gets in the field and you're like, well, does it have a green little thingy, you know, because we ran out and we had to use the green one. That's really difficult. But when you do that, and you do it right, you get the right people in there, then they're talking about inventory management, production, and production flow, and how that thing's going to be made cheaper. But when you look at the inventory part, the only way to not have that happen is to plan out your inventory and your sales. And so you make some assumptions. I'm going to sell this many this month. A little bit with your finger and stick it in there in the beginning. But when you do that, then you can back into, I need these by this date. And then you have a whole cash management plan that's forced by your production plan. And you need somebody that can do all of that. Because I think that circles right back to cash, and cash is king. You get that stuff going, then you start out with an organized company. Otherwise, you're constantly telling people, yeah, it's going to be 2 weeks. Oh, it's 2 more weeks. See, you hear about this from companies all the time. 2 weeks, 2 weeks. It's 2 weeks forever. Because of those pieces that you're talking about. But when you're working with your vendors and they're giving you firm dates, and you have a bill of material, and all of that stuff matters, right? I got a complete bill of material, and I'm going to forecast all of the components and their lead times, and that means I have to order this by this date and that by that date. That helps me with my cash. That's that cash management plan. It really becomes an entire business model that you have to have somebody do, or you have to do, or you have to learn by mistake the hard way.
Yeah, good operations person. Dave's my operations guy. When I was working with Ranch, he did operations. Your operations person is like that fills in every crack, figures out your lead times. Should be doing that. If they're not, then get a new operations guy. But they're the one who's doing all this forecasting and making sure that you're going to be able to pay salaries. And like Ranch said, as you grow with a hardware company, great, you have demand to order 10,000. Can you actually afford to buy 10,000, wait the entire 8, 10, whatever weeks it takes to make it, keep paying salaries during that time, and then you're going to sell more, generate more interest in that too, and by the time you get the 10,000, hopefully people want 20,000 more, but now how are you going to afford those 20,000 because you just spent the money on 10,000?
It totally falls into those gaps, right? I have to pay at least half. When you say that's typical, I pay half on order, half before they ship, so I've got this window of time, January, maybe March over here. But now I'm growing, and now I have to order again in February. That's the hard part. That's the growth will kill you.
Yeah, before you even got your first order, you're placing your second order.
And you haven't got paid for the first. And now you're out of money.
So in conclusion, hard tech is hard. So with that said, I want to actually give a round of applause and a thank you to the executives. The spirit of tonight is, builders helping builders. We want to build this community. I also want to recognize Chris from Worth. He's actually a supplier, like chip supplier, development kits. So they're here locally. Worth is a huge company. They have an actual local rep. Maybe you would say something, Chris, about what you guys do.
First of all, please enjoy.
You brought donuts. So.
Yeah, thank you. Please grab as many as you want. I'm not taking them back, so can't finish them. So first of all, I want to present myself, Chris Reyes, local area contact from Worth Electronics. We're a stocking manufacturer. Therefore, We try to stock 100%. Again, try, because we can't ever stock 100% of the products. From passives all to mechanics, so connectors, USB, USB-C. Also, we have the Me-Too parts, which are ferrites, capacitors, and resistors, as well as inductors. Those are one of our biggest differentiators because we have Midcom. That's one of the companies that we brought here, what made us be here in the United States, in all Americas. So, we support from the start of the idea to production. Therefore, we have prototyping. I can help you with samples, free sampling. You can give me a call, an email, and tell me what you're looking for, and I can help you with that. Again, for free. And we offer also design kits. These design kits have a variety of components, and there are samples, but as long as you have the little box, you can let me know, and we can refill them for free as well. Only
I have
at a time.
several.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can see that. Well, appreciate for that, and, well, yeah, I mean.
Okay,